Well, oh well, ladies and gentlemen. Hot on the heels of yesterday's video, where we were discussing Wargaming's questionable decision to turn around and buff submarines right after having nerfed them, and buffing them in a pretty significant way, we have yet another topic that does not exactly make Wargaming look fantastic, and dare I say, embarrasses them. Because finally, after years and years and years of asking for some meaningful changes in the interaction of surface ships versus CVs, not Wargaming, but Lesta goes and implements changes that we all have literally been asking for years since the CV rework. Changes that just make too much sense, and I am genuinely surprised that they're coming out for Lesta's version of the game. So quick backstory, quick lore dump here. If you don't know, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Wargaming left Russia and Belarus. They turned all of their IPs over to Lesta, who now runs Water Tanks, Water Warplanes, and Water Warships in Russia as not Water Warships, not Water Tanks, and not Water Warplanes, right? And they have been developing their own version of the game. So it's a completely different client than what you would experience here in North America, EU, Southeast Asia, or whatever. It's quite different now at this point. But today, the day of recording, the 12th, they released a dev blog with changes that, again, just make so much sense. So first off, one of the big ones, and not actually the one that was communicated to me was a topic of interest, is that they are changing the way modules work, particularly how modules get knocked out. So I'll just read straight from their dev blog. This is translated by Google, so it may not be perfect, but here we go. So, module changes. Main battery turrets, torpedo tubes, air defense, and secondary battery installments can no longer be destroyed, only temporarily disabled. Thus, there will no longer be situations in battle when, for example, a ship is completely left without main caliber guns or torpedo tubes and can no longer have any influence on the battle. Disabled secondary battery and air defense modules will now be restored over time, or similar to the main battery and torpedo turrets, they can be repaired with emergency team consumable. However, if only the air defense and secondary battery installments are disabled, then the emergency command will not be able to be squeezed to repair them. You will need to damage one of the other modules on the ship's main battery torpedoes, rudder, engine, or there is a fire or flooding or other temporary effect that can be eliminated with the emergency team. In addition, the number of hit points for the air defense and secondary battery and torpedo modules will now be fixed. Previously it was random, i.e. the base fixed values plus minus a certain value from the base value. That is amazing! That is great! That is fantastic! Just that there's so many things fixed with that change right there. So, starting from, let's actually work away from the bottom up. So, the hit point values being fixed. Finally, if you guys don't know, in the game right now, all of the hit points that are distributed amongst your secondary guns, your torpedo turrets, your AA turrets, and all that jazz, it is completely random. Meaning that even if you take all of the modules and the commander skills to increase the survivability of those modules, they could still have a teeny tiny hit pool. Like, you could literally have your starboard torpedo tubes have a hit pool of 40 hit points, yet your port side have a hit pool of 1,400 points. Now, Wargaming says it's like that because in naval combat, stuff randomly happens. And true, when you are slinging projectiles across the earth at each other, it is possible for, a shell to hit the deck and a piece of shrapnel just gets lodged into a turret or something and it knocks it out, right? It just gets in the right spot at the right angle because randomness, right? That's just how life is. However, in a video game, that is quite frustrating, especially when you're dumping commander points and modules into making these modules more survivable, right? So that is something that is super frustrating. And that was something I was thinking about when they were announcing all these changes to COTS, how they're trying to make COTS super competitive now, it's like, sure, you can have a super competitive mode, but when your game has so much RNG on it where you can have a destroyer like the Shimakaze just have its torpedo tubes get knocked out randomly because it got a low roll for the amount of HP points that it gets for those torpedo tubes. Or like with the AA guns, you build into your AA guns, you get a round of HE, and because, well, a lot of your AA guns unfortunately just got a low roll on the amount of HP they're going to have this battle, there goes all your AA guns, right? That is beyond aggravating, right? So that is a fantastic change. I think in terms of game balance, that is something that is just big ups right there. Okay. Now, the next thing, the fact that your AA can now be restored in Lesta's client is also amazing, right? Because this was something that was mentioned when CVs changed from the RTS CVs, which had a limited number of planes, to the now presently CV rework era of CVs, where the player controls the planes and there's now an unlimited amount of planes. Granted, they do have to be regenerated. And given the fact that since the dawn of the game, we have so many ships now that have either large caliber HE or god tier HE that can just rip and tear your AA guns apart in a couple of salvos. Conqueror is an excellent example of this. If you ever are on the receiving end of a Conqueror, you are going to lose like 50% of your AA guns in one good Conqueror salvo if most of the HE manages to hit your superstructure. And that just sucks, especially if there's a CV around, because after a couple of rounds of Conqueror HE, you don't have any more AA guns, or if you have any left, they're not going to be very good against a whole flight of CV planes, because, you know, the rest is on shambles on the deck, and the crew's melted to the deck too because of the power of the Conqueror HE. So now the fact that these AA guns can regenerate and repair, that's excellent. It helps counter the fact that these CV planes are infinite, right? So, and the way they do it too, it's not like they instantly repair, it is over time. They don't really provide much detail on how this works, but if you think about it too, they could be repaired, but then guess what? You eat some more HE, right? And now you've got a bunch of them broken again, but if you can manage to disengage, fall back, hit your, and I'm not really sure what's going on here with the translation. They say emergency team consumable, but then they say, what is it? Emergency command after that. So I'm not sure if they mean damage con in both situations. So it doesn't sound like they added in another consumable. I'm just assuming that damage con now can be used to speed up the repair of your secondary guns and your AA guns. So that's great. And yeah, that would definitely help cut back on the frustration of trying to deal with CVs in our version of the game. And these are two things Wargaming most definitely needs to work with and take a look at and just see if they could get it to work here. This is such a simple solution to the problem. The current solution we have in place that's in testing right now is so convoluted and so just... the coding is going to have to be impeccable for there not to be some type of issue with the upcoming changes to CVs that we are expecting here in the next couple of updates with the game if it manages to go through testing. This is just simple. All the modules have a fixed amount of HP. Your modules that you build into and your commander skills that you spend on survivability actually increase the survivability, and your AA guns, secondary guns can be repaired over time now. That's just great. I don't know why that wouldn't be implemented on our version of the game. And then the big news, which is what I got pinged with, is that also in Lesta's version of the game, guess who can catch on fire again, fellas? That's right, CVs. They are standardizing CV burn time and CV fires, finally, in Lesta's client of the game. Again, I have no clue why this isn't the norm on our client already. So for those of you that don't know, CVs right now, if you manage to set a CV on fire, they will burn for a grand total of 5 seconds. That is it. Now, granted, for those 5 seconds, they do burn at the rate of 1% of HP every second. So it's about 3 times the burn rate of a normal fire. Normally, fires burn for 0.3% of your ship's overall HP. But unlike carriers, who have a 5-second fire, every other ship in the game, of course, has a much longer burn time, especially if you're a battleship. So, while percentage-wise it's higher, duration-wise it's way lower, okay? So, what they're doing here, CVs now burn for 60 seconds at the rate of 0.3% per second. And they changed the fire protection coefficient to that of battleships. So they gave them battleship burn time. Perfect. Perfect. They also changed the damage con for CVs as well. It now only runs for 15 seconds. And it cools down in 80 seconds. Just like battleships. So now, it's still automatic though, so when they catch on fire, the damage con is going to instantly damacon it. So now, CVs getting called out in the open is a much bigger deal. Unlike in our version of the game, where when you catch a CV out in the open, and you let your guns rip, well, you probably have AP loaded if you're a battleship. You know what your shells are probably going to do unless you're a higher tier battleship versus an up-tiered CV. You're probably going to bounce off the deck, right? So now, if you catch them out in the open, load HE, set them on fire. And when that damacon goes up, wait 15 seconds, get another round of HE loaded, slinging toward the CV, and now you got him on fire. And he's going to burn for the full 60 seconds. There are now consequences to CVs being caught out in the open, much more than what you have currently, because again, most battleship caliber guns that can typically reach a CV when they get caught out in the open, because they're still, when they get caught or spotted, they're usually in the back of the map because it's usually the other CV spotting them. The plunging fire at that angle, again, with the deck armor the CVs has just leads to the shells bouncing off the deck, unless you're in something like the Yami Shiki or whatever. And even then, of course, against some upper tier CVs, they can still just bounce right off the deck. But anyway, not anymore. On Lesta's client, you can catch CVs on fire. Frickin' finally. And I really do not know why this is still the norm on our version of the game. Maybe because back in the day, well, no, because it's been like that since the CV rework. I was going to say, because back in the day when you would set the CV on fire, he could not launch any planes, so they adjusted it for 5 seconds, where there's 5 seconds where you can't, launch any planes. But correct me if I'm wrong, back in the RTS days, they did just burn, I believe, for a normal duration. I could be wrong. I didn't really play CVs that much back in the day. I didn't really touch them until right before and then just after the CV rework. So, yeah. But, again, this just makes so much sense. It doesn't make any sense why they have a 5-second burn time, but it's a percentage point per second. But it's still only 5 seconds. They have the automatic damage con that runs for a minute. But, yes, this whole dev blog just makes so much sense with these bits of it. I will link it in the comments down below. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they are going through and messing with, but these are the 2 main things that caught my eye that really should make their way over to our version of the game. And it's really embarrassing Wargaming that Lesta is pushing these changes through, changes that make complete and total sense in my mind. So, yeah. And like, I get that some CV players might say, well, now, there's going to be so much AA in the game. Like, look, there's already, at the beginning of the match, there's ships with max AA already perfectly intact, and CVs still get through that mess at the beginning of the game. There's still ships that, get caught out alone with perfectly intact AA, and they still get, bullied by the CVs. So I don't really think it's going to drastically, suddenly make the area around these ships a no-fly zone, but it's going to be more difficult to get through in the long run when, the CV's running out of planes and the enemy ship, the target ships, who, yeah, they've taken some damage, but they've been able to regenerate some of their AA guns, so it's going to make it a bit trickier for CVs to get through, and you're going to have to be a lot more careful about throwing away your planes in the attacks, right? So I think very good change. And I'm sure it's going to get balanced a couple of times, or changed, I should say, a couple of times on Lesta's server before we have a final version of it. But again, so much of these changes just make perfect sense. and Wargaming, what are you doing? These are two changes I think really need to be looked at and potentially implemented. Not potentially, they do need to be implemented in World Warships. They at least need to have some testing behind it and see how it goes. So guys, that's it for today's video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Hope you guys have a wonderful Wednesday and wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.